So I'm here with some lads from different countries around the world. These boys and others have been with me this week. We've had a 20 Schemes weekender at Nidri Church, and we, on the back end of that, we've had something what we're calling a Church in High Places intensive. And basically, Church in High Places is a Acts 29 initiative where we are seeking to encourage, train, resource guys from around the world. Someone's just scraped their chair. Who was that? Guess who it was? Captain Liberia. What was I saying? Yeah, Church in High Places, resourcing guys from different countries around the world, particularly those who would maybe have limited access to support and funding and just resources and training. So I'm just going to let the guys introduce themselves briefly. Just tell us your name and where you're from, and then we'll get into a conversation.
My name is Ronald from Nakuru, Kenya. Church planting, Covenant Baptist Church.
Okay.
All right, my name is Mario Menable from Bellville South, Cape Town, South Africa. Church we're planting is Reformed Faith Mission Community Church.
My name is Chris Brosette. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and have been planting churches in Los Angeles over the last 6 years.
Okay, cool. So let's just kick off with you, Chris, because your church plant has just come to an end, right?
Correct.
You've been through a difficult period with that.
Yeah.
You don't have to get into the dead specifics, but tell us just a little bit about some of the issues, some of the things that caused you to part ways with the plant, so to speak.
Yeah, so we planted Refuge LA 6 years ago. Really basically after recognizing a need in our community. So I grew up in that community, and a lot of the churches in that community are either just ridden with poor theology, which kind of shapes some of the church experience in Los Angeles, and basically led somebody to Christ. He started a ministry at a local rehab in our community, and we had about 20 of these rehabbers coming to our church, which was at that time a suburban church, part of Acts 29 network, and they had a hard time assimilating, and so we basically kind of accidentally planted a church to meet their needs, and I think that caused us because we didn't really know what we were doing or think through it. It caused us to kind of jump into things prematurely, I would say. And so after 6 years, a lot of the things that happened early on caught up to us. And so the best description or illustration I can really give to kind of explain the experience is we got sent out with a leaky ship. And so we had more like a small little dinky boat that had leaks in it. And as we kept going and as we kept picking up people and more people came into the boat, it just kept sinking faster and faster. And so we came to a place where after 6 years, we lost some key resources, which caused us to lose one of our pastors who was doing a phenomenal job at much of the organizational leadership and helping us build out infrastructure. And so we basically, after 6 years, came to a decision to say, after losing him, is it feasible? Is it healthy to keep going in the same way? And so basically, with him gone, that would have meant all of the kind of weight of the ministry coming back onto me when we were at a size where it just was unsustainable. And so we realized we could, that number one, that God's not asking any of us to kill ourselves for his mission. And so we learned a lot, and we said, you know what, it's unhealthy to continue forward without the capability and capacity to really meet the needs of people. So we had people coming, we had people meeting Christ, but we didn't have the ability to meet their needs. And so we decided to end well before it started sinking even more.
Okay, and so I want to come back to some of the problems you faced in a minute, but I just want to bring some of the other guys in, because this is a shorter one than normal because we're pushed for time. But Mario, you, how long have you been involved in the church you're currently with now?
5 years.
Okay, and prior to that, were you a pastor or a planter, or is this your first church?
No, this is the fourth church.
Okay.
So prior to this one, we were busy planting a church in Kimberley, in the middle of South Africa.
Okay.
I'm busy with that church plant. So my brother was actually the one that we called, or that we said, look, there's no gospel witness, good, healthy church in Bellville South. So we asked him, look, don't you want to start a church there? And we will have oversight over it.
Yeah.
So I basically just then moved from Kimberley, because we've got an elder there who could run with the church, from Kimberley to help him with the church plant. Okay. So when I got to Bellville South, that church basically was no longer, there was nothing. Everybody left at one
Cape
person.
Flats,
Cape Flats, well, yeah. So everybody left because it was not a prosperity type thing where people just want to hear what they want to hear.
So you were a prosperity preacher, right?
Yes. I used to be a prosperity preacher.
So what brought you out of that then?
Just basically I got basically very confused and just distorted with everything that this whole ministry was all about. So people were making much of me, putting me on a pedestal, I mean, all of those things. And I could feel some sort of power and control over people when I did that, when I was preaching prosperity gospel and miracle crusades, those kind of things. But when I would go home, I could not pray, I could not read my Bible, I was alone, I felt like a fraud, I felt like there was no God really, that all of this is just tricks and that kind of thing. Yeah. So it became a very personal thing after the hype was not there. For me, it wasn't sustainable for me. I'm a relational person. And so this whole prosperity thing puts you on a pedestal that makes you alone as a man of God. Nobody wants to be a friend to a man of God, you know. And then I just walked away from the faith and started basically longing for a real, authentic relationship with the Lord. And for about a year and a half was in the world, and then the Lord snatched me out of that, and I knew what I had now and what's happening. I could not go back to that. Yeah. So I was still in Cape Flats at that time, but I could not go back to that. So I basically ran away from Cape Town to Kimberley to get rid of all of that. Because if people now knew Mario is back with the Lord, all of that stuff would start again, and I didn't want that. So going back to Kimberley, started evangelizing, and basically, long story short, wanted to know what is the real gospel. Did a Google search, up came a sermon of Paul Washer, which just put everything in perspective for me. And that's where my life changed.
Paul Washer's blessed a lot of people with that sermon, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I know that. So Ronaldo,
Yeah.
tell us about your church, just a little bit about your ministry.
My church is in Nakuru. We have just planted.
Okay. How long?
2 months back.
Wow,
since July.
okay, so very new, right?
Very, very new. But there's not the first experience. Been it for the last 2, so this will be the 3rd one.
Praise the Lord.
Amen. The Lord is blessing us. We are grateful. We are seeing fruit already. In the few months we have been there, the Lord has converted a few people. We have had a few baptisms, around 13 people we have baptized. And we are continuing to labor for the Lord.
Okay, good. And now you guys have been here. I know, Chris, you're not on the Church in Our Places program, but you should think about it. But you've spent a weekend with us now, 3 or 4, a bit longer than that, but you've been through a weekend, which is our teaching weekenders. Have you got any takeout from that? Has it been completely irrelevant? Has there been some relevance for you guys? I'll start with you, Chris. Any takeouts from the weekender?
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me, there was some affirmation in the sense of some ability to identify with some of the struggles and being able to see what it actually looks like to create really a healthy infrastructure to work in difficult communities. And so I think it's been really helpful to to not feel like I was crazy. You know, I think when you're planting in hard communities and you're isolated, sometimes it feels like, man, am I crazy? Am I imagining this? You know, and so I think being in a place where you see tons of the same really just challenges and being able to see the way that you guys have addressed them has been really helpful, and it's been I would say it's been helpful to be able to identify and realize, like, man, like this is real hard stuff, you know. So
yeah, okay, bro. Mario?
Well, for me, first of all, just being among people that understands you, because when you're in a hard place like where we are, where there's gangsterism, all those kind of things, usually the churches that you would think or see as healthy would be the ones not in your community. So you don't have somebody you can relate to or speak to. And usually when you speak about the things you go through with suburban churches, they become cheerleaders to you. And they're not really a help to you because they can't relate to they don't understand the issues. So coming here on this weekend and especially listening to the testimony of some, having conversation with some of the guys, and then also seeing the deep theological depth, you know, that these guys have, even though they don't have education and all those kind of things. That's just a blessing. Because usually people would look at churches like ours where there are people in the community that didn't have any education. They would not even think that these people understand anything about any theological thing, you know. But to see that, see that they understand it and that they are living this, that's just a blessing. So you're not alone. There's people like you that understand you, and that's an encouragement.
Because let's get it right. We are nothing like your communities, like particularly you, Mario. We're nothing like. There's gangsterism around here, but there's no guns and all the madness you have to face. And we're very different on the surface. Yeah, I think what people often don't appreciate, particularly when they first come, are actually underneath the surface, there's lots of similarities.
Yes.
I think people see the nice houses because it looks different in Africa and think, this isn't a hard place. But actually, there's lots of difficulties, right?
Yep.
Ronaldo, what about you? What have you taken away? If anything.
I think I loved the fact that, you know, even through the preaching, the sessions, people who are handling those sessions were talking about practical issues. They have gone through the very difficulties. They are encouraging others in. So it's not like somebody is talking about things he has not experienced himself. You know, when you think about his called Williamson, who was talking about, you know, how he
Big
had
Ian,
Big Ian, all these big ideas he had, and how he was about even to give up. You know, it shows you that even us who are laboring, we face those same situations, but to hear their brothers who have faced them and yet they have continued to hold on, they have been encouraged by others, such a great encouragement that ministry is not about only theology, you know, in their head, but, you know, real experiences. People are going through tough times, but yet they remain to be faithful to the Lord.
Yeah, so now one of the problems we have in the UK is that there's a real class division in our culture. And the evangelical church is by and large quite affluent, very middle class educated people. And lots of our schemes, that we call them here, that we've introduced you to, are council estates, projects, are not reached by the traditional mainline churches. And it's been a real battle for us to get the church to take our communities as serious mission fields. Have you faced any of the same struggles in your ministries? Chris, have you come across that?
Yeah, I think the thing that's different about Los Angeles is Alan Hirsch talk. I think I heard Alan Hirsch say something about how it was hard for him to understand Los Angeles until he saw it as a small country. And I think one of the things that's different about our city is it's not segregated with poor over here, rich over here. It's all stacked on top of each other, and it's intermingled and integrated. And so you can have $1 million homes next to the projects, and it gives an appearance of maybe a diversified community socioeconomically, but really everything's kind of stacked within each other. So they might have an apartment building that's half of its government, and half of it is rented out, and it could be you just don't know. And so what that does
It would be the same here in this community.
Really, yeah. And so what happens is you don't really. I don't think people really understand the dynamics of people living in the same proximity but culturally being different. And so I think so it's hard to get people to understand, I think sometimes, hey, these issues are well, actually the way that you relate to these people are different, right? And so, and LA is also like a commuter city, like, so you can live in this part of the community, hang out in this part of the community, and all these different things. And so it makes it it's a constant moving pieces. And so getting people to understand, hey, like you have to pay attention to people who aren't like you, right? And so in LA, I mean, LA was one of the birthplaces of gangs, right? And gang culture. And partly because I think one of the reasons that is because it's such an integrated city like that, it's a city built on subculture, right? And so because communities they're not like segregated, and I mean there's partly some of that, but what happens is people hang out with people who are like them to find an affinity, because everything is just so stacked on top of each other. So to get people to understand, like, hey, you can't just, the comment, like, just preach the gospel. It's like, yeah, but man, some of these things, there's barriers to the gospel that are coming out based on what you might call gospel, and really might just be really just an appropriation of your culture, right? And so getting other churches to understand that has been difficult, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the Flats is much more segregated, isn't it, really?
Well,
or am I wrong about that? I've been to Cape Flats, and it just seems like it's I drove through the rich areas, and the Cape Flats they're very distinct areas. Right?
Yeah, so in our area, in Belvoir South, we would call it also a scheme.
Okay.
So there will be low-cost housing there, and flats like the projects.
Yeah.
And our people in our community are very territorial. So the people in the community would basically look after people in the community.
Yeah.
Which the bad side of that is if everybody knows who the bad guys are, and they will protect the bad guys from any outside, the cops would come in, whatever the case might be. So violence, all those things happens. I mean, you could walk any day of time down the street and see a man beat up a woman, or a woman beat up a man, or whatever the case might be, and nobody will interfere, even though they will know them. It could be a family member, because that's their business, and if you come interfere, then it becomes our business. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's exactly the same here, brother.
So that's the kind of dynamic you get. But in that community, people would be living there forever. So it's not, people don't move into our communities because of that protective layer, and people don't go out because of that protective layer, and because of the economical situation. People are poor, they don't have jobs, they're unemployed, they sell drugs. That's how they make their lives. Gangs rule certain pockets of the community. So that's basically how it is. So what the churches has done, but our community, again, unlike here, I've seen here, you find people that are unchurched. In our community, it's very religious. So almost everyone in our community has been to a church, to a Sunday school, has been, knows about Jesus, but the concept of God is, He's the guy that does the good things for us, if we tick off certain boxes, but we need to survive, and nobody actually think that they will go to hell anyway, because nobody feels that they are that bad. I mean, just an example, one of the guys that we know is a contract killer, that we share the gospel with that guy, he will agree, but if you ask him, so do you think that God will actually allow you in his heaven? Of course. Even though he killed people, he still thinks he's going to go to heaven one day. And so you've got a gospel that is not the gospel at all. You've got a gospel that says, I mean, even though you're a prostitute, as long as God knows it's your job, you have to look after your kid. If you're a drug dealer, God knows you need to make some money. He understands you, as long as you come now and then to church, that kind of thing, that you're okay. So there's no real gospel in our communities.
And so why do you think theologically conservative churches, regardless of denomination, but guys who trust the Bible, understand the gospel, understand the need to preach the gospel to sinners. Why do you think they're so slow to support work and ministries in our communities?
That's a good question to ask. I've been trying to ask myself that question.
Because it's true, isn't it? People go, well done, praise the Lord, we're glad you're doing it.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
That's about it. And I think part of it is also, like for instance, if you take some of our guys to a conservative church, it would be nice first and second time maybe. But you wouldn't want that guy with all the tattoos, with the, he's a bit rough around the edges, the way he speaks, a bit aggressive. You'll want him as a member in your church though. So it's nice to talk about him and to have him there. So I don't know what would be the reason why they would not want to really give into that. I do believe they pray for us. But yeah, I really don't know.
Do you think, is the question like, why do they not want to, or is it why are they reluctant to do it themselves? Or because I feel like, I've encountered people who desire and care to, but I think, if you could just kind of clarify.
Yeah, all of that. One of the big struggles we have here is getting British churches to see communities like ours in Britain as legitimate mission fields.
Yeah.
So they'll prepare to go off and be a missionary somewhere else. That's amazing, praise the Lord. But as soon as you say, well, why don't you give up all you have and move into our communities? And that's pretty cool.
I think...
the comfort.
Yeah.
You're talking about moving into our community?
Both, supporting.
Yeah.
So listen, I've been around planting for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's very sexy right now. But very little of it.
Yeah.
In the UK, I can't speak to your context, but in my context, and I think I know what you're going to say, very little of it, financially, resources, is going into our end.
That's right.
Of the spectrum.
I
So
think,
there's that, and then there's the individual.
I think a big reason is I think it might be hard for people to admit that really elements of access. So you think of what communities, either middle class or suburban or more wealthier communities have culturally, the access that they have to theological education, the access that they have to resources, which gives people an opportunity per se to so you think it's almost like might and power signifies health. Right? And so because we have the access, because we have power, because we have the money, it's almost as if we're the standard. And so I think what happens is we got to admit one of the most brilliant things that I think God has given us is His Word, and especially in an age and in a culture where information is all over the place and things are being thrown around. It's like you see God's brilliant plan to give us His Word, but the thing about the Word is you have to read it, and the thing about the Word is you have to think through it and process it. And I think in impoverished communities, education is not a big thing, and it's not like education makes the gospel more accessible per se. But I think there's elements of being able to be educated that allow you to really have access to theological education and also access to resources. And so some of these ministries have not only access to theological education, and they're working through certain things, and they've got to a certain level, but they've also had access culturally to move up the ladder of success in society, which then puts them in a position where I think they feel almost as if we're the standard. And so I think and then now they've found ways to then appropriate the gospel to their culture, and really what is really just a cultural expression of the gospel has been equated with gospel. So now you go into a community that's different, that might I think some middle class and highly Western communities value control, right? And so we want to control the output of our information. We want to control what you think of me. I can pay for control. I can just control everything around me, right? And so you have these conversations that are built around, if I come to you and I share vulnerability or something, I'm sharing with you what I want you to hear, right? Because I'm controlling your opinion of me. So there's this value of control. Now you go into the hood, people don't really care as much, right? And so now they're just gonna tell you everything they feel. Now, because this is a cultural value here of control, and here this isn't the same cultural value, this cultural value may be something like authenticity. And now when this person is authentic, this person doesn't know how to deal with that and says that's unhealthy, right? Because it doesn't match my cultural value.
That happens
all the time.
What do you think, Mario?
Yeah. Look, for just an example, for instance, if I invite you for coffee, say let's have a coffee, I'm actually inviting you to my house, in my home.
Yeah.
But if you invite me for coffee,
you can have good coffee.
we're going to a restaurant away from your house. You get what I'm saying? So that kind of community vulnerability, you getting into my face, in my space, that's protected with many of guys outside of a community. Another example I can make, if we sit just like this now, one of our church members might be there, and I ask her, so how's things with Bob, maybe your husband? She's not going to tell me, no, he's okay. She's going to tell me, no, you know what he did last night? He did this, that. And she's not going to care whether I know you and you and you and you. Yeah. I just asked her a question. That would be totally inappropriate in a different setting if it's a middle class type of.
Yeah, I talked about social cues in my talk about picking up on social cues.
Yeah. So those kind of things. And when you talk about somebody from the middle class moving into our community, what they will definitely see is this is going to be dangerous. It might be foolish. What about my kids? They're going to break into my house. All of those things that they are already afraid of when they look at our people. I mean, it's our people that breaks into their houses anyway. Mm-hmm. So those kind of things are there. So it is really a stepping out of your comfort zone if you come into our communities.
I think it's a failure to acknowledge that they've been tainted by culture.
Okay, it's interesting. What do you think, Ronaldo?
Yeah, I do agree with what the brothers are saying. But also I do think maybe gospel-wise, people have not come to understand that as we talk about the Great Commission, I think also we have laid boundaries or barriers, or we have made demarcations, like we think we have it, others they don't need it. And as he has said, it has been made like, because this is our standard, we deserve to have this. But in reality, it's also a lack of understanding why the Lord has given us this gospel. Because if you read the Bible, Jesus is very clear to us, the poor will always be there with us. So I think, it's the heart, the attitude towards what, how those we call probably the middle class, how they look at the poor. Probably they see them, they should not have the gospel. Although, as we talk like that, although I would say, personally, when I'm seeing in Nairobi, for example, where I'm coming from in Kenya, there is a sort of a shift. It's not like as it used to be, like nobody wants to go to the poor. I think more and more there are people who have realized there are people who are more receptive to the gospel than even these other cultures. So there are people going in, but although, as Mario says, the fear is still there. We will be mugged, we will be beaten up. I remember there's a brother who was asking me one time, why did you move to a certain place? Why do you have to live in the midst of those people? Are you not fearful of your life? So, yes, you are, but ultimately also I think we are burdened differently to reach people. And probably, as I see that burden to reach certain people with the gospel, others are not burdened the same way. And all sometimes, as the brother said, it comes also to comfort. There's no comfort among the poor.
No, there's a big idol comfort. I think we talked about that the weekend as well.
I remember, I think Tony Merida was saying last week when you Acts 29, be ready if you're going to go to the poor, be ready to sleep when one of your eyes is open, because you don't know what's going to happen. but yet they need to hear the gospel.